Single dad didn't expect much from a blind date until the woman at his table changed everything. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Reed Callahan was sitting in his UPS truck on a Saturday afternoon in Milwaukee, finishing his last delivery route of the week. And his buddy Marco was leaning against the loading dock at the warehouse, giving him the same speech he'd been giving for the past 6 months about how Reed needed to get back out there and start dating again. The problem was Reed had zero interest in dating. He'd been on exactly 2 dates in the past 6 years since his ex-wife left him for her CrossFit instructor. And both of those dates had been such spectacular disasters that he decided being alone was actually pretty great compared to sitting across from strangers making awkward small talk. Marco wasn't buying it though, and he'd cornered Reed during their break with that look on his face that meant he wasn't going to let this go until Reed agreed to whatever he was about to suggest. Bro, Diana has this coworker who's perfect for you. She's smart, she's funny, she's got her life together. Just meet her for one drink, and if it sucks, you never have to do it again, Marco said, and Reed was already shaking his head before Marco even finished the sentence. Man, I appreciate it, but I'm good. I've got Charlie and work, and that's all I need. The whole dating thing just isn't for me anymore, Reed said while closing up the back of his truck, and Marco followed him into the warehouse still talking. You're 36 years old and you act like you're retired from life. Your ex did you dirty 6 years ago, and you've been hiding behind being a dad ever since. Charlie's 10 now. He's not a baby. You're allowed to have your own life. Reed wanted to argue, but the truth was, Marco had a point. He had been using Charlie as an excuse to avoid putting himself out there because it was easier than risking getting his heart stomped on again. That night, Reed got home to find Charlie sprawled on the couch watching some YouTube video about baseball stats, and Reed was making dinner when his phone rang, and Marco's wife Diana was on the other end doing her own version of the same sales pitch. Reed, I know Marco already talked to you, but I'm telling you, Mia is genuinely great. She works at the high school as a guidance counselor. She's never been married. She's not looking for anything serious. Just coffee or drinks, 1 hour of your time, that's it. Reed was stirring pasta sauce and trying to figure out how to politely say no when Charlie appeared in the kitchen doorway with this curious look on his face, and Reed realized his son had been listening to the entire conversation. After Reed hung up with a non-committal, "I'll think about it," Charlie didn't even wait 2 seconds before asking, "Dad, who's Mia? Is she someone you're supposed to go on a date with?" Reed felt his face get warm because talking about dating with his 10-year-old felt weird in a way he couldn't quite explain. "It's nothing, buddy. Just Marco's wife trying to set me up with someone from her work. I'm not going." Charlie sat down at the kitchen table and got that serious expression he had when he was really thinking about something. "Why don't you ever go on dates like people do in movies? All my friends' parents who are divorced have girlfriends or boyfriends. How come you don't?" Reed stopped stirring and turned to look at his kid, and Charlie was staring at him with genuine curiosity, not judgment, and Reed didn't have a good answer that wouldn't sound like he was making excuses. "I guess I just haven't met the right person, and I'm happy with how things are. It's just me and you, and that's enough for me," Reed said, but even as the words came out, they felt hollow, and Charlie tilted his head. "But what if you could be happy with me and have someone else too? Wouldn't that be better than just okay?" That question hit Reed harder than he expected, and he ended up texting Diana that night saying he'd do one date, just one, to prove to everyone, including apparently his own kid, that he was fine and didn't need this. And Diana had responded with about 15 excited emojis and said she'd set it up for Saturday night at the Copper Tap. The whole week leading up to Saturday, Reed kept waiting to feel nervous or excited or something, but mostly he just felt resigned, like this was an obligation he had to get through. And by the time Saturday evening rolled around, he'd mentally planned out exactly how the night would go. 45 minutes max, be polite but not too engaged, have a fake early morning excuse ready, and get home before 9 to watch the game. He showed up at the Copper Tap at 7 on the dot, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt he'd grabbed off his bedroom floor. Zero effort, because what was the point of trying to impress someone when he already knew this wasn't going anywhere? The brewery was one of those trendy Milwaukee spots with exposed brick and craft beer lists that took up an entire chalkboard wall, and Reed grabbed a table near the back, ordered an IPA from the waitress, and pulled out his phone to scroll through nothing while he waited. He was mentally rehearsing his exit speech, something like, "This was really nice, but I'm not in a place to date right now, I hope you understand." When a woman walked through the front door looking around nervously, and Reed recognized her from the extremely brief description Diana had given him, which was basically just brown hair, glasses, really pretty smile. He raised his hand in a half wave, and the woman, Mia apparently, walked over with this expression that was equal parts relieved and terrified. And before Reed could even say hello, she sat down and immediately launched into, "I'm going to be completely honest with you. I almost canceled this like 3 separate times. I'm absolutely terrible at dating, and I have no idea what I'm doing here." Reed felt himself actually smile for the first time all week. "That's funny because I spent the entire drive over here planning my exit speech for how to politely bail after 45 minutes, so we're starting from pretty low expectations." Mia laughed, and it was genuine, not polite, and she relaxed back in her chair. "Okay, so we both don't want to be here. That actually makes this way less stressful. Should we just get it over with and leave now, or stay for one drink to prove we tried?" The waitress appeared and Mia ordered a cider. And once they were alone again, Reed found himself saying, "Let's stay for one drink. If nothing else, I can tell Marco I did it and he'll stop harassing me at work." They clinked glasses in this sarcastic toast to low expectations. And somehow that completely killed the pressure, and they started actually talking like normal people instead of two strangers performing a first date. Mia told him she was a guidance counselor at one of the Milwaukee public high schools and had been doing it for 8 years, never married, spent most of her 20s and early 30s focused on her career. And now her parents called her every Sunday to ask when she was going to settle down and give them grandchildren, which was driving her crazy. "I love my job and I love my life, but everyone acts like I'm incomplete without a husband and 2.5 kids. Diana's been trying to set me up for months, and I finally agreed just to get her off my back," Mia said, and Reed appreciated the honesty. He opened up more than he'd planned to, told her about his ex-wife leaving 6 years ago, the affair, the messy divorce, and how he'd basically given up on trusting his own judgment when it came to people because he'd been completely blindsided. "I thought I knew her, thought we were solid, and then one day she just told me she'd been seeing someone else for months and she was leaving. And I've been gun-shy ever since because if I was that wrong about her, what else am I wrong about?" They talked for another hour about everything from terrible first date stories to their favorite terrible reality TV shows. And somewhere around the 90-minute mark, Reed realized he'd completely forgotten about his exit speech and was actually enjoying himself. Mia mentioned she coached a girls' softball team on weekends as a volunteer thing, and Reed lit up. "My son Charlie is obsessed with baseball, plays Little League year-round. I spend every Saturday at some field somewhere watching 10-year-olds try to figure out how to slide into second base." They traded youth sports horror stories, the parent drama, the kids who cried when they struck out, the absolute chaos of trying to organize a team snack schedule, and Reed found himself laughing in a way he hadn't in months. When the waitress came by to ask if they needed anything else, Reed looked at his phone and realized it was almost 9:30, and they'd been sitting there for over 2 hours. "I should probably get going. I've got an early morning," Mia said, but she didn't sound like she was in a hurry, and Reed nodded. "Yeah, me too. This was actually really nice. Way better than I thought it was going to be, if I'm being honest." They walked out to the parking lot and stood by Mia's car. And there was this awkward moment where neither of them knew exactly what to do next. "Can I get your number? Maybe we could do this again sometime, as friends," Mia said, and Reed pulled out his phone. "Yeah, absolutely. Friends sounds good. Low pressure." They exchanged numbers, and Mia gave him this smile that made his stomach do something weird. "Thanks for not being as terrible as I expected, Reed." And he laughed. "Right back at you, Mia." Reed drove home with his windows cracked, even though it was cold, because he needed the air to think. And his brain was doing this thing where it kept replaying parts of the conversation, and he'd catch himself smiling at random moments. He'd gone into that brewery expecting to fulfill an obligation and prove everyone wrong, And instead, he'd spent 2.5 hours talking to someone who actually got it, who understood what it was like to have people constantly in your business about your personal life, and who made him feel like maybe being alone wasn't the only option that made sense anymore. When he got home, Charlie was still up, even though it was past bedtime, and his son looked up from his book with obvious curiosity. "How was your date? Was she nice?" Reed sat down on the edge of Charlie's bed and surprised himself by saying, "Yeah, buddy, she was actually really cool. We had a good time." The Monday after their date, Reed got a text from Mia at noon that just said, "Student just asked me if college is required or if he can become a professional gamer instead. How's your day going?" And Reed had laughed out loud in the middle of sorting packages at the warehouse. And he'd texted back, "Guy on my route tried to convince me his clearly not a service dog needed to ride in the truck with me for emotional support, so pretty standard Monday." That's how it started. Just random texts throughout the day sharing the weird stuff that happened at work. Nothing flirty or heavy, just two people who'd accidentally become friends talking about their lives. And by the end of that first week, they were texting every single day about everything from terrible TV shows they were both watching to debates about whether deep dish pizza was actually pizza or just casserole with delusions. Marco noticed immediately because Reed was checking his phone way more than usual during their lunch breaks, and when Marco asked if he was texting the guidance counselor, Reed had been quick to shut it down with, "We're just friends, man. It's not like that." We both agreed it was low pressure. Marco had given him this look that clearly said he wasn't buying it. "Bro, you text her every day. You smile at your phone like an idiot. That's not just friends. That's called dating without admitting you're dating." Reed had insisted Marco was reading too much into it because they genuinely were just friends. There was no romance happening. They just enjoyed talking to each other, and that was perfectly normal for two adults to do without it meaning something more. 3 weeks after their brewery non-date, Reed was at Charlie's Little League game on a Saturday morning, one of those perfect spring days where the sun was out, but it wasn't boiling yet. And he was sitting in the bleachers doing the parent thing where you clap every time your kid's team does literally anything. Charlie was playing second base, and Reed was half watching the game and half answering a text from Mia about her disaster attempt at making homemade bread, when he heard someone say his name and looked up to see Mia standing at the bottom of the bleachers holding a coffee and looking just as surprised as he felt. "Reed, what are you doing here?" she asked, and he pointed at the field. "My son's team, number 12. What about you?" And Mia laughed. "One of my softball teams is playing on field 3. I was walking over and saw you. This is so weird." Charlie had noticed his dad talking to someone, and during the break between innings, he jogged over to the fence. "Dad, who's that lady you're talking to?" And Reed felt his face get warm for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. He waved Charlie over and made introductions. "This is Mia. We're friends. She works at the high school. Mia, this is my son, Charlie." Charlie looked Mia up and down with the brutal honesty only 10-year-olds possess and said, "You're really pretty. Are you my dad's girlfriend?" And Reed wanted the bleachers to swallow him whole. Mia handled it way better than he did, just laughed and said, "Nope, just friends. Your dad and I met a few weeks ago, and we've been texting about boring adult stuff, nothing exciting." Charlie seemed satisfied with that answer and jogged back to his position, but not before yelling over his shoulder, "Dad, she's really cool. You should hang out with her more." Mia climbed up the bleachers and sat next to Reed without asking, and they ended up watching the rest of Charlie's game together, talking through the entire thing and completely missing half the plays because they were too busy debating whether cereal was a soup. Reed found himself hyper-aware of how close she was sitting, like he could smell her shampoo and feel the warmth coming off her arm, and he had to actively remind himself that they were just friends and this wasn't a thing. After the game, Charlie came running over and launched into a play-by-play of everything that had happened, like Reed hadn't been sitting right there watching, and Mia listened with genuine interest, asking questions about his batting stance and what position he liked best. And Charlie looked at his dad afterward and declared, "She's the coolest adult I've met in forever. Can she come to my games more?" That became the pattern over the next month and a half. They'd run into each other at community events or games, grab coffee after and talk for hours. And Mia started helping Charlie with a social studies project about Wisconsin history, because that's literally what guidance counselors do. And she was good at making homework not feel like torture. Charlie thought she was amazing. Reed's mom noticed he was suddenly in a way better mood and kept asking pointed questions about this Mia person Diana mentioned. And Marco refused to believe they were just friends no matter how many times Reed insisted. Man, you literally rearranged your schedule to go to that farmer's market because you knew she'd be there. That's not friend behavior, that's I have a crush behavior, Marco had said, and Reed had denied it. But the truth was sitting in his chest like a rock because he'd started to realize Marco was right. The shift happened on a random Tuesday night when Reed was lying in bed scrolling through their text thread, and Mia had sent him a meme about her students at midnight with a message that said, "Can't sleep, brain won't shut off, you up?" And Reed had responded immediately even though he'd been half asleep, and they'd ended up texting until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. The next morning, Reed woke up and his first thought was checking if Mia had texted. And that's when it hit him like a freight truck that this had stopped being just friendship somewhere along the way, and he'd developed actual feelings for her, the kind that made his stomach flip when her name popped up on his phone. And the realization terrified him in a way that made him want to run in the opposite direction. His ex-wife had seemed perfect too. For years she'd seemed perfect. And then one random Tuesday, she'd told him about the affair and walked out and destroyed everything Reed thought he knew about his own life and judgment. He trusted her completely, believed they were solid, and he'd been catastrophically wrong. And the idea of trusting his feelings again when his track record was that bad felt like setting himself up for the same disaster. What if Mia seemed great now, but turned out to be just as good at hiding who she really was? What if he was reading signals wrong again and getting attached to someone who didn't actually want what he wanted? What if he let himself fall and ended up wrecked again, except this time Charlie would be collateral damage because his son was already attached to Mia, and losing her would hurt him too? Reed started pulling back without really meaning to. He'd take hours to respond to texts instead of minutes, make excuses when Mia suggested grabbing coffee, decline invitations to community stuff he knew she'd be at, and he told himself he was protecting both himself and Charlie from inevitable hurt. Mia noticed immediately because of course she did, and her texts went from frequent and chatty to cautious and infrequent, like she was trying to figure out what she'd done wrong. She stopped suggesting they hang out, stopped sending random memes at midnight, stopped asking how his day was, and within 2 weeks they went from talking every single day to complete radio silence. And Reed told himself this was better, even though it felt absolutely terrible. Charlie was the one who called him out on it, and it happened on a Saturday morning when they were eating breakfast and Charlie asked, "Is Mia coming to my game today?" And Reed said no without looking up from his cereal. Charlie was quiet for a minute, then said, "She hasn't come to any of my games in like 2 weeks. Did you guys have a fight or something?" Reed didn't know how to explain adult emotional avoidance to a 10-year-old, so he just said, "We've both been busy, that's all." And Charlie looked at him with that expression kids get when they know their parents are lying, but can't prove it. "You were way happier when you were texting her all the time. Now you're back to being quiet again. I don't get why you stopped being friends with her." Reed didn't have a good answer for that, because the truth was complicated and messy. He'd stopped being friends with Mia because he'd started having feelings that were definitely not friendly, and he was too scared to do anything about it. So instead, he just ghosted her like a coward, and now they were both miserable, and Charlie was asking questions Reed couldn't answer honestly. His mom had noticed too, and cornered him after church that Sunday with, "You want to tell me why you look like someone kicked your dog?" And when Reed tried to brush it off, she'd given him that mom look that meant she wasn't buying his excuses. "I've known you for 36 years. I know when you're running from something, whatever it is you're scared of. Running doesn't make it go away, it just makes you alone while you're scared." Reed went to bed that night staring at his phone with Mia's contact pulled up, and he typed out about 6 different messages trying to explain why he'd disappeared. But every single one sounded either pathetic or dishonest, so he deleted them all and just lay there feeling like the world's biggest idiot for ruining the best thing that had happened to him in years because he was too scared to take a risk. 3 weeks of complete silence from Mia felt like Reed had voluntarily amputated a limb, And he spent most of that time bouncing between convincing himself he'd made the right call and lying awake at 2 in the morning, knowing he'd screwed up the best thing that had happened to him since his divorce. Charlie's Little League team had clawed their way to the district championship through a combination of decent coaching and sheer 10-year-old determination. And the night before the big game, Charlie came into Reed's room and sat on the edge of the bed with his serious face on. "Dad, can you text Mia and ask if she'll come to my game tomorrow? I know you guys aren't friends anymore or whatever, but she always made me feel like I could actually win. And I want her there." Reed felt his chest get tight because his kid was asking for something simple, and Reed had made it complicated by being a coward. He stared at his phone for 20 minutes after Charlie went to bed, typing and deleting the same message about 15 times, before finally settling on something that didn't make him sound like a complete disaster. "Charlie's team made it to the championship tomorrow at 2. He specifically asked if you'd come. No pressure if you can't make it, but I wanted to ask." He hit send before he could overthink it, and then immediately regretted every word. But 3 minutes later, Mia responded with, "I'll be there. Tell Charlie good luck." And Reed felt this weird mix of relief and terror because he was going to have to see her and probably explain why he'd ghosted her for almost a month. Saturday afternoon hit, and Reed showed up at the field with Charlie, who was bouncing with nervous energy. And Reed scanned the bleachers, trying not to be obvious about looking for Mia, but failing completely. She showed up 15 minutes before first pitch wearing jeans and a Brewers t-shirt. And when their eyes met across the field, Reed felt his stomach drop because she looked good, and he'd missed her, and he had absolutely no idea what to say. Mia climbed the bleachers and sat 2 rows behind Reed instead of next to him, like she would have a month ago. And the distance felt intentional and deserved, and Reed wanted to turn around and apologize, but the game was starting, and Charlie was looking at them both from the dugout with this hopeful expression that made Reed feel even worse about the whole situation. The game was intense in that way youth sports shouldn't be but always are. Tied score going into the final inning, and Charlie got up to bat with 2 outs and a runner on second. Reed was gripping the edge of the bleachers so hard his knuckles were white, and he heard Mia yell, "You got this, Charlie," from behind him. And Charlie stepped up to the plate and absolutely crushed the ball into left field for a double that brought in the winning run. The entire team erupted, parents were screaming, and Charlie came running over after they'd finished celebrating on the field and threw his arms around Reed, then turned and ran up 2 rows and hugged Mia, who looked completely surprised but hugged him back just as hard. "We did it! We actually won! Can we go celebrate? Can we get pizza? Can Mia come?" Charlie was talking at about 1,000,000 miles an hour, and Reed looked at Mia, who looked uncertain. And Reed said, "Yeah, Bug, we can get pizza. If Mia wants to come, she's welcome." They ended up at the same pizza place Reed had taken Charlie to 100 times, one of those loud, chaotic places with arcade games and terrible lighting, and Charlie bolted for the arcade the second they walked in, leaving Reed and Mia sitting across from each other in a booth with approximately 4,000 pounds of awkward tension between them. The waitress came and took their order and disappeared, and Reed was staring at the table like it might give him answers when Mia finally broke the silence. "So are we going to talk about what happened, or are we just going to pretend the past month didn't happen?" Mia's voice wasn't angry, just tired, and Reed forced himself to look up and meet her eyes. "I owe you an explanation and an apology. You didn't do anything wrong. I got scared and handled it in the worst possible way." Mia leaned back in the booth and crossed her arms. Not defensively, but like she was protecting herself. "Scared of what exactly? Because we went from talking every day to you disappearing completely, and I have no idea what I did to make that happen." Reed took a breath and decided the only way through this was complete honesty, even if it made him look like an idiot. "My ex-wife seemed perfect. For 7 years, she seemed perfect. We had Charlie, bought a house, built this whole life, and I thought I knew her completely," Reed said, and his voice was rough. "Then one random day, she told me she'd been having an affair for 6 months and she was leaving, moving to Arizona with the guy, and I didn't see any of it coming. I was completely blindsided." Mia's expression softened, but she didn't interrupt, just let him talk. "I stopped trusting my own judgment after that. Like if I could be that wrong about someone I lived with and loved for that long, How can I trust anything I think I know about anyone else? Reed ran his hand through his hair. And then I realized I had feelings for you. Real feelings, not just friendship. And I panicked because what if I'm wrong about you too? What if you're great at hiding who you really are, just like she was? And this time it wouldn't just be me getting destroyed, it would be Charlie too because he's already attached to you. Mia was quiet for a long minute, and Reed braced himself for her to tell him he was being ridiculous or that he'd hurt her too badly to fix this, but instead she said something that cut right through all his defenses. I get being scared. I've been single my whole life because I'm terrified of picking the wrong person and ending up miserable or divorced like half the people I know. But Reed, you can't protect yourself and actually live at the same time. You have to pick one, and hiding from everyone who might hurt you means missing everyone who won't. Reed felt his throat get tight. I know, my mom said basically the same thing, and I've been miserable for 3 weeks because I chose protecting myself over taking a risk with you, and I'm so tired of being scared. Mia leaned forward and her voice was gentle but firm. So what are you saying right now? Because I need to be really clear about what this is. I can't do the weird friendship thing where we both have feelings but pretend we don't. That's exhausting and I'm too old for games. Reed met her eyes and just said it. I'm saying I want to actually date you. For real. Not as friends. I want you in my life and in Charlie's life if you'll still have us after I disappeared like a complete idiot for 3 weeks. Mia bit her lip like she was trying not to smile. I'll have to think about it. That was a pretty jerk move, ghosting me like that. And Reed felt his heart drop until he saw she was fighting back a grin. I'm kidding, yes, obviously yes. But you're buying pizza for like the next month as penance. Charlie came running back from the arcade at that exact moment, demanding more tokens, and he looked between them and his face lit up. Are you guys friends again? You both look way less sad than you did 5 minutes ago. Reed laughed. Yeah, Bug, we're friends again. Actually, more than friends. Mia and I are going to try dating for real this time. Charlie pumped his fist in the air. Yes, I knew it. Grandma owes me $5. I told her you guys would figure it out. And Reed had to have a conversation later about not making bets with his mother about his love life. But for now, he just pulled Charlie into a side hug and looked at Mia across the table and felt lighter than he had in years. 3 months later, Reed woke up on a Saturday morning to the smell of something burning and Charlie's laughter coming from the kitchen. And when he walked out, he found Mia standing at the stove, attempting to make pancakes while Charlie sat at the table, showing her his baseball card collection and explaining in excruciating detail why each card was valuable. Mia looked up when Reed appeared in the doorway and grinned. Your son has very strong opinions about the 1987 Topps set. I'm learning so much. And Charlie beamed, like teaching adults about baseball cards was his life's calling. Reed leaned against the doorframe, just watching them, and the thought hit him clear as anything. I almost didn't show up to that date. I almost skipped the whole thing. Mia caught him staring and raised an eyebrow. What's that look for? And Reed shook his head. Nothing. Just thinking about how I walked into that brewery expecting absolutely nothing good to come from it, and now you're here burning pancakes in my kitchen while my kid talks your ear off about baseball cards. Mia flipped a pancake that was definitely more brown than golden. Are you complaining about the pancakes or the baseball card lecture? And Reed crossed the kitchen and kissed her. Neither. I'm just really glad I showed up. And Charlie made gagging noises from the table, but he was grinning the whole time. Sometimes the best things in life happen when you show up with zero expectations and let yourself be surprised. And Reed had learned the hard way that protecting yourself from potential hurt also means protecting yourself from potential joy. And you can't have one without risking the other. He'd spent 6 years convinced his judgment was broken and dating wasn't worth the risk. And then Mia had walked into that brewery and proven that sometimes taking a chance on someone, even when you're terrified, is exactly what you need to do. If this story reminded you that low expectations can lead to the biggest surprises and that being brave enough to trust again is worth the risk, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and if you've ever almost skipped something that ended up changing your life, we love hearing your stories. Thanks for being here with us, and remember, sometimes the person who changes everything is the one you meet when you're not even trying. You just have to be willing to show up and see what happens.